George S. from Lincolnton, North Carolina.
I asked for strength that I might achieve. I was made weak that I might learn humbly to obey. I asked for health that I might do greater things. I was given infirmity that I might do better things. I asked for riches that I might be happy. I was given poverty that I might be wise. I asked for power that I might have the praise of men. I was given weakness that I might feel the need of God. I asked for all things that I might enjoy life. I was given life that I might enjoy all things. I got nothing that I asked for, but everything that I'd hoped for. Almost despite myself, my unspoken prayers were answered. I am among all men most richly blessed. My name's George Sharp, and I'm a real alcoholic. Hi, everybody. I want to take just a moment to say a special thanks to the people who are responsible for putting together this convention and who were kind enough to invite me and my wife Judy to come down and be a part of it. And Patty gave me plenty of time to worry. She called me, it seemed like over a year ago. And two nicer people could not have been chosen to host Judy and I. Then Jim and his wife Carrie, we've had a great time, and just want to say thanks. I need to go back and explain a couple things to you. The thing I opened with, I've been doing that since I've been asked to share in Alcoholics Anonymous, and over the years people have asked me where it comes from, and I need to confess to you that I didn't write it. I mean, you already knew that. I say that to remind myself. It's been attributed to an unknown Confederate soldier. And then people will ask me, well, why do you begin that way? And there are many reasons, and I've given all the reasons, I'm sure, over the years, and all of the reasons are true. You know, when you stand behind a podium like this and look out at a crowd like you all, and you're about to try to share your insides, there's a tendency to become a little nervous. And I've heard people stand behind podiums like this and say they have butterflies. I have never had butterflies. Hummingbirds. Sometimes it feels like a covey of quails going off in your stomach. But after you do this a few times and you start to get a little age on you, it's down to buzzards. So I need to say something that helps put me a little bit at ease. And you know, I also said that I was a real alcoholic. And I want you to know that I don't say I'm a real alcoholic to separate me or distinguish me or in any way isolate me from any other alcoholic in this room or anywhere in the world. I say I'm a real alcoholic because I've come to know the value of the identification process in Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I say real alcoholic, it gives me a chance to go to the book which has saved my life and tell you that I know what a real alcoholic is, because I am one. What do I mean when I say I'm a real alcoholic? Well, I'm the guy that has a physical allergy to beverage alcohol. And once I take a drink, I have no control. I become mentally obsessed with the thought of my next drink, because you see, I've developed the phenomenon of craving. And so I crave and I'm mentally obsessed with the thing I'm most allergic to. And I'm powerless. So when I say I'm a real alcoholic, that's what I'm talking about. And I never say the words real alcoholic that I don't remember with great affection an old guy in this fellowship who's dead now. His name was Wino Joe. And Wino Joe and I were talking one time, and we were talking about this very thing, the real alcoholic. The things that may distinguish the real alcoholic from the heavy drinkers and the social drinkers, etc. And at that time, there's some literature going around Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was a series of questions, and I don't know, there must have been 40 or 50 questions that this literature would ask, and the deal was if you answered yes to 10 or more of those questions, chances were real good that you were an alcoholic. And Wino Joe says to me, he says, George, you know, I think I can narrow those questions down to 4 or 5, and if you answered yes to any one of them, you'd be a real alcoholic. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, well, what'd you ask him, Joe? He said, well, you ever had the roof of your mouth sunburn? Have you ever been arrested while in jail? Or did you ever suffer from rusty zipper syndrome? Or did you ever awaken feeling rather delicately and manage to weave your way through the furniture and make your way to the bathroom where you commenced to brush your teeth with preparation H? Well, I'm a quick study. And I caught on, so I said, well, have you ever experienced amnesia and deja vu at the same time? So I know at least 2 people who know what a real alcoholic is. But our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. And you know, folks, if what I'm like now, if it were to be no different than what I used to be like, then nothing would have happened, and I wouldn't have an opportunity to stand here tonight. But I'm here because something did happen. And I am indeed a different man than what I used to be like. I grew up on a farm down in South Georgia into a family of poor alcoholics. You've heard the expression, too poor to paint and too proud to whitewash. I've heard people stand behind podiums and say, you know, we were poor and I never knew it. We always had plenty to eat. Well, by God, I knew we were poor. What I'm about to say in no way is any theory on how you become an alcoholic, or I don't deal with statistics or anything like that. The only statistic I know or care to deal with is the one in our big book that says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. I know that statistic, but all of my immediate family were real alcoholics except for one brother. And I grew up in fear. I grew up frustrated and angry. And folks, when I say I grew up angry, I'm not talking about I'm mad at you. No. I'm talking about the stuff that eats your insides out. The stuff that makes me want to say, you know, it may take me 5 years, but someday, buddy, I'll get you. I grew up insecure, I grew up lonely. I grew up with uncertainties and resentments and guilt, remorse and shame and a misplaced ego and a hole in my gut. That's nerves. And the way I handled things when I was young was I would either fight or run, and most of the time I tried to run. And while I was very young, I would run to the woods that were nearby where I lived. And I had made me a little house out of pine saplings in those woods, and I'd go out there and I'd stay for a day or two until I got too hungry or too cold or whatever, and I'd go back home and whatever, take whatever punishment I had coming. And I'd stay and I'd go to school for as long as I could, and when things got too rough, I'd head off to the woods again. And it kind of became a pattern for the way I was to live the rest of my life until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. As I grew older, I ran farther. We lived not 20 miles from the Geechee River Swamp down in Georgia, and that kind of became my haven away from home. I'd take the gun that I'd stolen, and I'd go down in that swamp, and I'd stay for a week. And I'd shoot rabbits and squirrels and occasionally even a deer, and I'd catch fish. I'd come back to the big town of Woodcliff on the weekends, and I'd sell what I had for a nickel or a dime or a quarter, whatever everybody would give me. And I'd take that money and I'd go to the local store there and I'd buy me a few things and steal me a few things and head back for the swamp. And that's the way I grew up. In and out of school, in and out of trouble. I had my first lockup experience before I ever got out of grammar school. I was picked up down in Florida by the Florida State Patrol. I was put in a holding tank. And they tried to reach my mother by phone, and they were unable to. And finally, I gave them the name of a bachelor uncle of mine that lived in Springfield, Georgia, and they managed to reach him. And they apprised him of the situation and told him they had me locked up down there and wanted to know what to do with me. And my uncle told the Florida State Patrol, he said, turn him loose and let him go where he wants to go. And they turned me loose. And I got on the highway that day and I hitchhiked to Springfield, Georgia, where this uncle of mine lived, and I moved in with him. I think I liked what he told the State Patrol. And I was able to stay with this uncle of mine until I had finished 2 years of high school. And at that time, he was offered a job opportunity up in Northern Virginia to become a principal of a school up there. And, well, the truth was that he didn't want to have to take me with him, and I knew that. And so we started looking around for a place for me to go, and we found a school system up in North Georgia called the Berry Schools. And that's where I went. And I want to take just a minute to tell you a little bit about the Berry Schools, because though it did not mean much to me then, it has come to mean a great deal to me in recent years. But Berry was a place that came about as a result of a woman named Martha Berry who had this one-room shack there on some land, and some of the mountain kids would come down on Sunday mornings and go to her Sunday school. And sometimes after Sunday school, they would hang around and she would teach them to read and write. And before long, the word got back to some very influential people about what she was doing. And Henry Ford gave this lady $1 million. This was back when $1 million was a lot of money. And to make a long story short, within a few years, Martha Berry had acquired 32,000 acres of land, and she built a school up in Rome, Georgia. The buildings were built by the students, and she had a motto that no work is dirty except that which soils a soul, and she believed it with all her heart. Because if you went to school there, you had to be poor, you had to work, and you had to go to church. That was a deal. And so I went to Berry for my last 2 years of high school, and it was a great experience. We also had a college there. You could also work your way through college. And it had been my dream since I was a kid to grow up one day to be like my grandfather, because he was the only man in my life that I ever wanted to emulate. My grandfather was a Superior Court judge, and people seemed to respect him and listen to him, and I remember on Sundays that sometimes there'd be 20 or 30 people come to his house and sit around and talk, and a lot of them would stay and eat breakfast. And I just wanted to grow up to be like my grandfather. So I went to Berry College with the one idea that I would stay there long enough to get enough hours to get into University of Georgia Law School. And I would transfer, and I would one day graduate from University of Georgia Law School and become a great barrister, and one day become a judge like my grandfather. And that was my idea when I went to college there. But I had been there 3 years, and one Saturday morning, this girl that I'd been dating ever since I'd been in high school at Berry, she had already graduated from Berry College and was now a school teacher in Rome. She drove back to campus this Saturday morning. She had a brand new automobile. And she and I were sitting there in a car talking, and she looked over at me with those big brown eyes of hers, and she says, "George, do you know that you and I have been going together for over 4 years, and you've never once mentioned the word marriage?" An hour later, I'm standing before a justice of the peace in Ringgold, Georgia, saying I do to something I didn't, but I didn't know how to say I don't. So we were married. Now my wife was perfectly willing and encouraged me to continue my education and get my degree and go to law school because she knew my dream. But I may have mentioned something earlier on about pride. My pride would not allow it. I went out and I got a job as a shipping clerk in a nut and bolt place. And I shipped nuts and bolts all over the country for a few months. And one day, one of the owners of the company came to me. He said, "George, you ever thought about selling?" And I said, "No, Sam, I never have." He said, "Well, would you give it a try?" I said, "Well, sure." So Sam took me out through South Georgia, showed me how to sell nuts and bolts. And he worked with me for a couple of weeks, and he said, "I think you can do this deal." And he left me on my own. And you know I could. I sold a lot of nuts and bolts in a very short period of time, and I had some money, and money was something I never ever had. And I went out with this newfound success, and I bought my wife and I a brand new house. I bought me a brand new car, and I filled our house with brand new furniture, and I also bought me a brand new pickup truck and a new shotgun and fishing equipment. And to use the South Georgia expression, we were living high on the hog. And then I got a letter from Uncle Sam who said that it appeared we were about to become involved in a conflict in Southeast Asia, and needed me to sign up for the draft. And I did one of the most stupid things I've ever done, drunk or sober. I went down and joined Uncle Sam's Marine Corps. I won't stand here and bore you with a long Marine Corps drunk-a-log because that's precisely what it was. I will tell you this, I had 8 weeks continuous sobriety at Paris Island, South Carolina, I guarantee it. Because you see, drinking was a way of life for me from the time I was old enough to walk. That's what we did in my home. We drank. My father died when I was very young. He died a terrible alcoholic death. He burned himself to death. And when my mother remarried, she remarried a real alcoholic. He was a bootlegging farmer. He made it and sold it and drank it, and I stole it and sold it and drank it. And that's the way I got started, and it's the way I went until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just the way I lived. Well, I survived the Marine Corps, and I came back and went back to work for the same company. And Sam appealed to this, by now, tremendous ego I had, and said, "We're going to be opening up in the Mississippi Delta, and we need somebody to go down there and develop that area for us, and you're just the man. Would you do it?" And I said, "Well, sure, Sam." And so off I go out in the Mississippi Delta, and I'm talking about Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and I'm working out there, and the pattern repeats itself. I'm doing real good. And I start not coming home, not even on the weekends, because I'm out there and I'm drinking and I'm gambling and I'm running around with strange women. Then one day, after a few months, I got a call from Sam that told me to come into the office. He needed to talk to me. I went in and Sam fired me. I want you to know Sam loved me. He did. It was the worst thing he ever had to do. He told me that. And I made it as hard for him as I possibly could. But the reason Sam fired me is because I was down there and I was drunk on the job, and I had Sam shipping nuts and bolts all over that Delta to people who hadn't ordered no nuts and bolts. Sam had a son. His name was Crockett, and I gave Crockett his first drink because I was Crockett's hero. By then I had me a 1965 GTO triple black, 4 on the floor, 389, 3.2 barrels. And he idolized me. So I taught him how to drink. So when Sam told me I was fired, I got mad at him, reminding him all the things I'd done for him, how his company was a success directly due to my sales ability. And then I threatened him. I said, Sam, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, buddy. I'm going to go out and start my own nut and bolt business. Take me about 3 years to run you slap out of business, and you'll probably come to me looking for a job, and I ain't going to give you one. You know he fired me anyway? But I got another job in town selling Ford automobiles, and you know how the luck of the alcoholic, they seem to fall upstairs sometimes. It just so happened that the Mustang had just come out, and God, I sold a lot of cars, short period of time, and I impressed Julian, and Julian decided to make me manager of his truck and fleet department. And boy, I did a great job, and his service manager retired, and he put me over to his service department. 3 months later, Julian called me in and fired me. And the reason Julian called me in and fired me was because I was drunk on the job and I was cussing out the customers. And I was unable to get a good paying job for a while, and you know, people still expected the bills to be paid, and I was not able to do it. And to my wife's great dismay and humiliation, we wound up in bankruptcy court. And then I had another opportunity to get in the advertising business, and this was great because it got me out of town. They transferred me to Charleston, West Virginia. And it was while I was in Charleston that I had my first prolonged blackout experience. There's a period of 6 weeks that went by about which I remember absolutely nothing. Don't know what I did, where I went, nothing about it. I know I came to in the house of a coworker, and the first thing I remembered is him handing me an envelope from an attorney back in Rome, and it was noticed that my wife had filed for divorce. And I jumped in my car that day and I drove all the way back to Rome. And on the way home, I stopped and I bought me a wig and a fake beard and dark sunglasses. And the reason I stopped and bought a disguise was they had a lot of warrants out for my arrest in Georgia, and I knew it. But anyway, I went back to my house, and it was totally vacant. I mean, there's nothing left but one chair, and the phone was still on the wall. And I happened to look over at the neighbor's yard, and my wife's car was parked over there. So I called him up, and my neighbor Cecil answered the phone. I said, Cecil, this is George. Is my wife there? And he said, sure. And she got on the phone, and she said, George, my lawyer's name is so-and-so, and his telephone number is so-and-so, and she hung up. Well, I called right back, and Cecil again answered the phone. I said, Cecil, let me speak to my wife. And Cecil said, George, your wife told me to tell you that her lawyer's name is so-and-so. And I said, hold it right there, Cecil. Now, y'all got to understand that me and Cecil never did really get along. I had a big old white German Shepherd I used to sick on Cecil from time to time. But he started that song and dance, and I said, let me tell you something, Cecil. I said, I'm going to give you 15 minutes. Now, that was my mistake. I said, I'm going to give you 15 minutes to send my wife out of your house, and if you don't send her out, I'm going to come over and break your damn door down. Now, Cecil knew I meant it, because he had seen me many a Sunday morning when he and his wife were getting ready to go to church. I'd be out in my backyard fast drawing, shooting at barrels and shooting at my dogs. And so he took me seriously. And, you know, about 12 minutes, I guess, had gone by, and my wife hadn't come out, and shoot, I was beginning to hope she wouldn't come out. I was looking forward to knocking down his door. But I heard the sirens, and I managed to get away, and I went back to Charleston. And from Charleston, they transferred us to Wilmington, Delaware. And we left on a Friday, and we were to be at work bright and early Monday morning in Wilmington, Delaware. Monday morning, a week later than that, I came to in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And in my pocket was more money than I had ever seen. And I knew nothing about how I'd come across all this money. But there's a guy with me who related the whole story. He said that he and I started out together for Wilmington. And we got to drinking on the road, and we decided we'd better stop at a motel and spend the night. And we did. And during our overnight stay, there's an old drunk that lived there at that motel, and the old boy didn't have no driver's license, and his registration wasn't up to par, and his tags were illegal, and the inspection sticker was wrong. Somehow he had managed to hit a car and do some serious damage to the car, and rather than get the police involved, he had called the motel manager in and talked to him and said, please find out who owns this car and let me settle up with him. And so I'm the guy that they settled up with. I've often laughed about that. That wasn't my car he hit. I'd already lost my driver's license too. But we went on to Wilmington, and they let us go to work. And I'll have to tell you that my supervisor in Wilmington and I didn't get along very well, because and he would have fired me, but he couldn't, and the reason he couldn't is he was a heroin addict. And he had made a mistake of letting me watch him mainline heroin, and I had made the mistake of letting him watch me chug a load booze, and we kind of had an unspoken agreement. You don't tell on me, and I won't tell on you. So that was our working relationship. But he did the next best thing. He transferred me to Richmond, Virginia to get me out of his district. And all my traveling, I had met a girl that really physically could have been Miss America. She was a beautiful, beautiful lady. She'd been a model at Montalto's down in New Orleans, and she'd modeled some for Wiremakers in Philadelphia. And she's just a knockout, nice girl. And when I got to Richmond, I called her up and told her where I was, and she'd fallen in love with me, and she came down, and there's no delicate way to put this, we shacked up. And after a period of time, she became pregnant. And one night, in a drunken rage, I came in and I beat this girl up. She was 8 months pregnant. And I beat her bad. And she was bleeding profusely, and I was terrified. And I got her in the car and tried to get her to the hospital, and then on the way, I prayed maybe the only sincere prayer that I'd ever prayed as an adult. And it was desperation. God, please help me. Please let this lady be all right, and please let this baby be all right. And if you'll do that for me, God, I promise I'll never take another drink for as long as I live. And I meant that. And I got her to the hospital, and sometime later, a doctor walks out in the hallway, and he's holding a baby boy who's crying, and the doctor's smiling, and he said, George, this is your son. He's going to be okay. And your lady's going to be all right, too. And I was so damn happy. You know what I did? Yeah, I went out and got drunk. I showed up at the hospital 2 days later, where I was met by the same doctor who said, George, your son died. I don't remember doing this, but I'm told that I commandeered a nurse in an elevator and forced her to take me to the morgue. And I went through that morgue opening those slabs until I found this boy, and I was standing on the elevator holding him when the authorities came. I want you to know that for the next 6 years, I lived as few men have and survived. I drank as few people have and lived to tell the tale. I came to know what it's like to eat garbage out of pizza out of garbage cans, and I came to know what it's like to hurt people. I became a thief. One time I held up a convenience store, and I jerked a guy that was working in the store across the counter, and I beat him half to death. And the only thing I took that night was one bottle of wine. I spent a lot of time in jail, but I was like, I heard one old boy say, you know, hell, every time they lock me up, they raise my standard of living. You know? And it was next to the last time I got locked up. I've been locked up one time sober. Innocent, you know. But the last time I got locked up drunk, I was put in a cell with a guy who went into DTs, and I was hallucinating, and somehow we survived. And we started talking, and this guy had been to a thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. And he's obviously I'm in here because I didn't do what they told me to do. And he said, I don't really know a lot about Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, I do know one thing, that I went there a couple of times and I met some of the nicest people I've ever met, and I think they really wanted to help me. And he said, if you get out of here, why don't you give them a call, and they might can help you. And you know, I knew I wasn't going to get out anytime soon because I'd been before the same judge too many times. I was what he called a repeat offender, and this time he was going to put me away for a long time. But I did manage to get my case continued, and I hired an alcoholic lawyer. And when I got out on bail, instead of going to the bridge on as I always would have done in the past, I went to a place in Richmond called 210 Madison Street, this old clubhouse here. And I sat in there all day, and people would buy me a cup of coffee and sit down and talk to me. And that night there was a meeting up at St. Mark's Church, and they all encouraged me to go to it. And I walked up there, but I didn't go inside right away. I sat outside, and I was trying to listen to what they were doing on the inside. Anyway, there was a girl that came late, and she saw me sitting out there, and she just walked over and grabbed me by the arm, and she says, come go in with me. And I got up and I went inside with her. And I don't remember anything that was said at that meeting that night. I remember one thing, that after the meeting there was an old man there who walked over to me, and he looked me dead in the eye and he stuck out his hand. And he said, I'm so-and-so, and I care. That's the only thing he said. Well, he's not the first person ever told me he cared, but he's the first person ever told me that I believed. I have no reason for believing him, but I did. And so every Monday night for several weeks, I went back to that meeting looking for that man. And as far as I know, I've never seen him again. But I started meeting some other folks, and they started encouraging me to go to other meetings
And I did. And before long, I got caught up in the spirit of the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was surrounded by old-timers, and I have a great affection for old-timers. I'm not talking about people who have long-term sobriety necessarily. I'm talking about people who have long-term of sobriety and know that spiritual life is not a theory, that live it. And I was surrounded by people like that. And they told me I should look for a sponsor. And so I began to look around for somebody that I wanted to be my sponsor. And after several weeks, I finally decided on a man. He had been around Alcoholics Anonymous since early 40s. And he was a kind, soft-spoken, gentle kind of a fellow with soft gray eyes. And when he talked, people listened and seemed to command great respect from all the members of the fellowship. And I said, well, that's the man I'm going to ask to be my sponsor. And I'll never forget the night that I asked Wallace to be my sponsor. I was a little bit timid, and I said, Wallace, some of the old timers around tell me I need a sponsor, and I'd like for you to be my sponsor. And the fella who was soft-spoken and had soft gray eyes looked at me, and those soft gray eyes turned to little steel ball bearings. And the mellow voice turned into a gravel pit. He said, I'm going to tell you something, boy. He said, I've been watching you ever since you've been around Alcoholics Anonymous. And with every fiber of my being tells me to get the hell away from you and stay the hell away from you, because you ain't nothing but trouble. He said, but you've asked me to be your sponsor. And I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I owe, anybody who asked me to help them, I owe them that. So I'm going to be your sponsor. And I'll tell you right now, he said, if you're here because you want to get sober and stay sober, I'll go to hell and back with you. But if you're here for any other reason, and I suspect you are, you can go to hell by yourself. I'm going to be your sponsor, George, but I'll tell you right now, that's all I'm going to be. I ain't no banker. You will not be borrowing no money from me. See that station wagon out there? That's my private automobile. You'll never ride in it. My home is my castle. You'll never darken this door. You ain't gonna come out there beating no food off my table, boy. And I thought, what in the hell have I done? So with that understanding, Wallace became my sponsor. A year later, Wallace is standing at a podium like this at a Southeastern convention where he introduces me as his son. I have already moved into his house. He's already bought me a car. Because he got tired of hauling me and my rider around looking for a paint job. But he never did any of those things. And he never became my friend until he was certain that I had done the things that were outlined in this book for people like me to do in order to recover from alcoholism, namely the 12 steps. all of them. Wallace did some other things for me, for which I'll be eternally grateful. He not only taught me the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, he showed it to me. He took me to meet some of the people that were here when it was begun. He gave me an opportunity to talk with them. I got to share for many hours with Abby Thatcher's best friend. Not only that, he taught me the value of our traditions. Why we must at all costs preserve our traditions. It's the future of Alcoholics Anonymous depends on our upholding those traditions. Wallace is dead now, and I miss him. But you know, I've been around this deal long enough that people look at me and think I'm kind of a soft-spoken, mild-mannered, somewhat even dignified, gentle sort of a person. And one day, a young man named Lee came to me, and he looked into my soft hazel eyes, and he says, "Some of the old timers around here tell me I need a sponsor, and I've been looking around, Mr. Sharp, and I'd like for you to be my sponsor." Well, my soft hazel eyes turned a hellish green, and in a deep, raspy voice, I said, "I'm going to tell you something, boy. I've been watching you ever since you've been around this deal. And every fiber of my being tells me to get the hell away from you and stay with me because you ain't nothing but trouble. But I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I owe a debt of gratitude, and you've asked me to be your sponsor, and I'm going to be your sponsor. And if you're here because you want to get sober and stay sober, I'll go to hell and back with you. And if you're here for any other reason, you can go to hell by yourself." And on and on. Lee owes me a lot of money. Our home kind of became his home for a while, and until he got on his feet, and now he's moved away to Atlanta, and he's doing very well. And we have a meeting at our house on Wednesdays, and about every Wednesday lately, during our meeting, Lee calls me, and it seems like some old young fella saw him around meetings in Atlanta and thought he was a gentle sort of a person. And the story goes on. I once read a story about a village of creatures that lived at the bottom of a great crystal river. And this river flowed silently over all the creatures that lived at the bottom of it. The rich and the poor, the young and the old, the healthy and the infirmed. And all those creatures that lived at the bottom in their own special way clung to the rocks down there at the bottom of the river because they had been taught since they were born that they had to cling to those rocks because should they ever let go, the current in that river was swift and strong, and it would grab them and would sweep them downstream and smash them against the other rocks, and they'd be killed. And so each creature in his own way clung to the rock from the day he was born until the day he died. Finally, there was one little creature who said, "I'm bored. Though I cannot see with my eyes, I think this river knows where it's going. I think I'll just let go." And all his buddies looked at him and said, "You're a fool, man. You let go, and that current you worship is going to grab you and sweep you downstream and smash you against the other rocks, and you're going to die a whole lot quicker than boredom." But the little creature just took a deep breath and let go. And sure enough, that current grabbed him and swept him downstream and smashed him against the rocks. Time and again it smashed him, but he refused to cling to another rock. And a phenomenal thing happened. As the current swept him downstream, it also began to lift him up. And before long, he's sailing along in that river above all the rocks. And he's being battered and bruised no more. And of course, as he swept downstream, to all the other creatures, he's a stranger. And they see him sailing along in that river, and they looked up, and they say, look, there's a miracle. He's one of us, yet he flies. He's a miracle. And the little creature that's sailing along in that current looks down and says, I'm no more miracle than you. All I did was let go. That's just a story. Yet every time I think about it, I'm reminded of me when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And my rock was old ideas. And I heard it over and over and over. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go, absolutely. And I saw the miracles floating in the current. And I heard them. Thank God I heard them. And I'm bruised and battered no more. I stand before you tonight a free man. I stand before you tonight a man who's most richly blessed. I took it to heart when they said that nothing so much ensures our sobriety as intensive work with other alcoholics. Hell, I married one. And my wife and I, Judy, our happiness fellowship has saved our lives. So you'll understand if I say, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I know what it means to countless of us. I know what it will mean if we keep it the way we found it. I'm winding down, and I know y'all got happy feet. So let me say this. It's been said 1,000 ways, but nowhere is it said better than it's said in our book. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find here and join with us. For we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And you'll surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.